Easter, everyone. In wanting to do my part, I went to Macy's. I got a shirt that matched my favorite spring flower, the azalea. And I want you to know that as I walk around, I leave pollen wherever I go. Squeeze me hard, the pollen just pops out. But you know, pollen is a part of rebirth. It's a part of creating the repopulation of life. So I'm trying to do my part. If you read the newsletter this week, I told you that this is my 19th Easter as a graduating minister. And that's 19 different messages around the same subject. Last year, someone reminded me, and it felt good that actually people listened, that I talked about Judas last year, and the fact that Judas actually was probably the most loving disciple because he played the part in the narrative about instigating what needed to happen in order to produce the rebirth of life. And this year, as I think about where I am personally, where you perhaps are, where we are as a nation, and the seminal teaching around the idea of Easter, it was not by accident that I chose the words conjuring justice as the theme for this particular month. The word conjuring is an interesting word because I think most of us imagine witches standing around a black pot stirring, right? But the actual meaning behind conjuring is to call upon or to bring into existence. To call upon or bring into existence this idea of justice. So I have a question for you right off the bat, and that is, what is the difference between something that is just and something that is unjust? What is the difference? If you were called upon to explain that to people, what words would you use? Because we are exposed to both sides of that balancing act. We are faced every single day, every news feed, every news blast with something that is unjust. And thankfully and prayerfully, there are things that balance that out that are just, because we realize that there is an innate justification that exists with what we call spiritual law. That light is far more powerful than that which is dark. Truth, then, is far more powerful, immeasurably so, than that which is a lie. And so that means that anything that is saturated or defined or aligned with lying or injustice eventually will find its demise. And like all of the symbology that teaches us about what rebirth means, we realize then that there is that perpetuation of justice, the conjuring of that, but the timeline of that, the experience of that, is predicated upon individual and collective participation, right? It doesn't just automatically come around if you and I don't do anything. We are called upon to be activists for justice with regards to being the instrumentation by which this presents itself in our human experience. So an unjust law, it's a code that is put together by a power majority group, and it compels a minority group to obey, but it does not make that judgment binding of itself. Does that sound pretty accurate? An unjust law is this thing that's mandated by a power majority group in order to control the lower class or lower substructures of people and thinking and cultures, but it doesn't bind themselves to the same ideas. You know that that's not a new experience, right? In fact, if you are a Bible scholar or someone who's even interested in the unfoldment of how Holy Scripture came to be, you're probably familiar with the Council of Nicaea and in Constantinople, where they all got together and they laid it out on a big table And they said, what books are going to go in this? And how can we rearrange these words in order that we can create these laws, some of them unjust, so that we can create this semblance of false power? And if there are never people who question that, then culturally and generationally, we continue to just keep those things. How many laws have been overturned by people who have said, no, no more. We will not abide by this unjust law. And so then a just law, by the same token, is a code or an ethic where a majority compels a minority to follow something and then is willing to follow that themselves. Basically, that's just integrity. And you and I are also in the position to be in alignment and make integrity with just law. And by just law this morning, I want to talk about spiritual law. So what is spiritual law? Spiritual law teaches us that it is done unto us simultaneously, unilaterally, there's that word as we think. It is done unto us as we contemplate, ponder, chronically and habitually the thoughts, the energy systems that are within mind. So we bring forth our collective experience. And in order for you and I to be a host of just use of spiritual law, what does that mean for us? That we have to continue to become curious as to all of the barriers that we have created and built around the ineffectiveness of that. I have to look at what parts of my life are incongruent with using spiritual law in a just manner. I have to look at what I'm telling someone else to do and I'm not doing it. Because if I'm not doing it, then I am an instrument of unjust usage of law. Oh my God. It's so easy to point the finger, right, at other people who are instruments of unjust laws. But where in my own world am I also doing the same? And so such events as the rebirth story, the Easter story, the pagan story, that all has its roots within this particular time of the equinox and this time of celestial uprising with regards to nature and birth. Where are you and I called upon to re-examine the way in which we are instruments, the way in which we are just with the usage of spiritual law? So there are many people who have come before us who have, I would say, wholeheartedly, with every fiber of their being, thrown themselves into both the physical and the spiritual rediscovery or rebirth of justice. In just 3 days, it will be the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King. And what we have been doing since the beginning of January is we have been having our practitioner interns, and Penelope has done such a beautiful job in narrating why we are lighting this candle. And it is in commemoration of those people, such as Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi, who gave their whole lives to creating the congruency of justice, both in physical form and in spiritual form. And the commonality between these two spiritual icons was the fact that they understood that they had to live it. They couldn't just preach it. They couldn't just sit on a golden throne and pontificate, but that they had to find ways to be boots on the ground individuals in their humanity in order to lead and to exemplify and to live in a fishbowl existence, to allow their flaws to be pointed out, to allow everything that was human about them to be picked apart like vultures in order to give themselves over for the greater good, for the freedoms that are inherently ours. And so as they did this and as the world looked on, we realized that at times when people go to that extreme, that it so threatens the side of humanity that is rooted in the unjust, that they feel that they have no other recourse than to kill the thing that is threatening them. And so we look at the lives of Gandhi and we look at the lives of Martin Luther King Jr., and today we also look at the life of a master teacher whose name was Jesus, and we see the commonality in the assassination, if you will, of this light of justice. And we have to look at then our response to that, because what we are told over and over again is that that level of power and influence and congruency is not held for the special, but that it is actually the calling of every sentient being. It means that you and I are called to the same extent of the congruency of our physical and our spiritual nature in order to be the divine instrument of that which is just to be exemplified. And I wonder sometimes if we look at the history and we look at what has happened to these people and we ponder if we don't want to go that far. But that's what you and I are designed to do. Now, I'm not standing here saying that you have to go to that level and that that's what your demise will be, because there have been other great teachers that have not had that same ending. But it is ours to do. Have you ever sought after comfort? And when we seek after comfort, sometimes we feel as though if that's the thing that we can obtain, if that's the arrival point, then all will be well. But you and I are not designed for comfort. We are designed for evolution. We are designed for a spiraling up. And when we commit ourselves to the justice act of spiraling up in our divinity while we are in this particular human form, then the conjuring of not just justice, but the uncomfortableness of others will always be there with us. It's hard to imagine that someone like Martin Luther King Jr., who today is epitomized and honored in all arenas and in all races across the board, that was not the case when he was actually alive. And in fact, right at this time, on April the 12th, in 1963, he was in a Birmingham, Alabama jail. I actually personally feel that his writing, a letter from the Birmingham jail, is perhaps his greatest work. Because in that, what he does is he calls out injustice. He said, "How does one determine when a law is just or unjust? A just law is a man-made code that squares with the moral law or the law of God. An unjust law is a code that is out of harmony with the moral law. To put it in the terms of St. Thomas Aquinas, an unjust law is a human law that is not rooted in eternal and natural law." And so as he was sitting there in the jail in Birmingham, and he was in jail because he had coordinated a nonviolent action against the idea of segregation, and because he was creating this march, because he was bringing people together in opposition of something that was not just, they quickly passed through these laws in Alabama that said that you can't demonstrate, you can't trespass, you can't picket. You know, all of a sudden, these laws just came up overnight. But he did it anyway. He did it anyway. And as he was sitting in the jail being arrested for having created this demonstration, he was vilified and picked apart by all of these other religious leaders for not obeying the law. But what kind of laws are we to obey if they are unjust laws? And so as we think about this in terms of what is ours to do, we have to remember that we get to break down that which is just and unjust. 4 days later, while he was in in jail after he was reading this newspaper article from the local clergymen who were condemning him for his hypocrisy in breaking the law. Dr. King wrote the now famous letter from a Birmingham jail in which he broke down the difference between what is just and what is unjust, stating that we as human beings have not only a legal, but here you go, a moral responsibility to obey just laws. Not just laws that are man-made or human-made, but just laws that are spiritually given. Spiritually given, that teach us that we are one. Spiritual laws that are given to us that tell us that it is done unto us as we thinketh. And so what do we do with those around us who continue to only think in the negative, who forget the divinity of their existence? It is unjust for us to not live by example for those people. It is unjust for us to contain within the walls of the center these principles and to live where it's comfortable without finding and redefining and rebirthing the mission of what is ours to do in this world. And so I am a person who doesn't sit very long in comfortability because I'm going, what is mine to do? I'm not someone who wants to just be satisfied with whether or not we can fill this space and meet our budget, because that's just one very small sliver of the experience of our spiritual and collective call. Yes, there are things in the mundane of our human existence that we must take care of, but what is the greater good? What is the greater thing that is asking us to take and to live these principles in such a way that it busts through all of the need to be comfortable? There is no such thing as retiring in spirituality. But what there is there is a rewiring of our mind. There is a constant rebirthing of the call within us until we take our last breath. My beautiful colleague, Dr. Nancy Anderson, you don't know her, but she has been a part of Centers for Spiritual Living for close to 50 years. She rewired, not retired, she rewired in her elder years to San Miguel de Allende in Mexico. And I just got word this morning that she's making her transition. And what I loved about Dr. Nancy is that she was an advocate for global initiatives around the principles of the science of mind. It wasn't about proselytizing. It wasn't about saving souls. It was, how do we bring this philosophy into other cultures in a way that doesn't threaten their culture, but enhances their culture? And she was talking about this long before anyone had any idea, long before others felt that there was anything else to do other than just their little church experience. She was like, no, there's a whole world out here. And my friend wrote me this morning to let me know, because Dr. Nancy she's a patron of my foundation. And even on her retirement pension, she was offering what she had to me and to the kids in Cambodia and to India. And the person that wrote me this morning said, I just wanted you to know that as she was laying in her hospital bed and her children are all around her, she's got the sweetest countenance because there is such a level of fulfillment within her. And I want all of us to have such a level of fulfillment that in the final hours, as we prepare to rewire and rebirth into yet the next experience, that we can look back and we can say, did I do every single thing possible that I was called to do? And I know that that kind of charge can become very cliched about living your best life. about understanding that time is precious, about understanding that in this particular incarnation that you have skills and talents and infinite potentiality that you are to explore. And we hear that so often that sometimes we forget the validity of that. But I want to remind you this morning that not only is that the pathway of just living, but it is the very nature and the very pull and the very inherent energy that incessantly whispers into our ear, what's next? How are you going to expand? What new idea are you going to explore? And so, yes, Dr. King wrote that it is a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. And right after that, when he was released, just weeks later, he went on to Washington, D.C. to deliver his I Have a Dream speech. But if you go back to the letters from a Birmingham jail, one of the things that he wrote about, which I absolutely love, is the idea of tension. You know, tension? We're always told about, you're so tense, but there's spiritual tension. Do you know when the insides of the seed crack through the shell, it does so because there's tension. You know when the pearl is being formed inside the clam from the irritation of the sand, it does so because there is tension. And when something new and just is wanting to come through you in a larger way, it does so because there is tension. He wrote, I must confess that I'm not afraid of the word tension. I have earnestly opposed violent tension, but there is a type of constructive, non-violent tension which is necessary for growth. Just as Socrates felt that it was necessary to create a tension in the mind so that individuals could rise from the bondage of myths and half-truths to the unfettered realm of creative analysis and objective appraisal, so must we see the need for non-violent gadflies to create the kind of tension in society that will help all rise from the dark depths of prejudice and racism to the majestic heights of understanding and brother and sisterhood. Where do we see that today? We see that in teenagers in Parkland who stand up out of their own human trauma for just laws. And we see them being vilified by media and those who have an attention and alliance for profit and greed. We see those even yesterday, the day of Transgender Day of Visibility. We have so many incredible transgendered members within our own community. Thank you all. And I honor you. That visibility brings a productive tension in order for all of us to look at and to examine what we feel is this or that or this or that, and to unearth and expose our unjust biases. We look at LGBT, and we look at racial inequality, and we look at the disparagement of women, and we look at the Me Too movement, and we begin to understand that it is this tension that becomes necessary in order for justice to rise. So I want you to think about it for a moment. What if I were one of those people that was being vilified and picked apart? Would I have the same moral compass as a Martin Luther King Jr. to be able to pen and scribe something so eloquent from a jail? Would I be willing to do that? Or would I fall back upon my own my own indiscretions and my own personal pain and allow that to override what was mine to do. Because it isn't our singular journey, is it? It's a collective journey. And so the more that we gather together to understand this, the more that we begin to realize that rebirth is actually about calling out hypocrisy. So Easter is about calling out hypocrisy. The hypocrisy of what? The hypocrisy of death. Death of justice. Death of dreams. Death of equality. All of those things are hypocritical to the true nature of the divine design of those of us who call ourselves sentient beings. And so it is on this holiday that we look at a particular man. His name was Jesus. His name was not Jesus Christ. And then when you're mad, it's not Jesus H. Christ. But Jesus. One person who was considered to be a great example or a way shower. Christ simply means life principle. When you or I are in alignment with justice, spiritual justice, when our lives are moving in that particular alignment by our actions and there is a congruency, we are operating from a Christic energy, an energy of life principle. Life principle then showcases the hypocrisy of the idea of death. So Jesus, this man who had become actualized in consciousness, was then Jesus the Christ, or Jesus the person who was exemplifying the I amness of God, the life principle. And so in the combination of those things, there is a divine potential, a fulfillment that happened in human form. The symbology of the story, the cross, if you've ever looked at that, if you ever contemplated that, it's far more than what the great mystic teacher Dolly Parton said, which was, get off the cross, we need the wood. But it was about understanding that there's something very, very potent and symbolic. Symbols are important, right? So the cross, when you look at the vertical line by which the arms of Jesus are depicted as being there, that vertical line is a representation of humanity. It is the representation of human consciousness. Some scholars even call it coma consciousness. That in our humanity we fall asleep. We fall into a coma. And we think that that vertical expression is the only thing that exists. It is very true to the point of fact that we can only see so much, and so we only then interpret life from what it is that we are available to see. And so it becomes very vertical with regards to our interpretation. So this becomes humanity. This is the representation of coma consciousness, or a very singular small fraction. It is not the full picture. So then the vertical coming down represents spirit's descent into matter. What that simply means, spirit meaning the ethereal or the divine, cascades, comes down, and it does what with the coma consciousness? It intersects. And in the intersection of that, we have a choice. We have a choice to recognize that and realize that in that vertical spirit down into matter, rooted into the ground, that we are rooted into something that is eternally just. We are rooted down into something that is eternally powerful. And it invites. You see, the vertical invites the horizontal to understand and to interplay in that particular circumstance. And so the symbol of this thing called the cross then isn't just interpreted as that which is crucifixion, which is this way, but it also exemplifies that which is resurrection, which roots us down from the ethereal into humanity. And so perhaps when you see a cross, if you have religious wounding, how many of you have religious wounding? Perhaps when you see that particular symbol, you can use that now as a new touching point and to realize that it's calling you to be an instrument of that which is just. It's asking you not to forsake that which is your humanity, but to allow this to wake up. And so when I enter into life like this, and then this intersects with my life, and I choose to wake up, then I envelop all of that into that beautiful prayer. And I recognize then that my life becomes the fulfillment of the life principle. And that I too then begin to see glimpses of the exemplification of what it means to be a Christ. You are a Christ. You are a Christ. We are all Christic beings. But you and I will never fully actualize it unless we begin to do the work of exposing that which is unjust in spiritual thought, as well as exposing that which is moral bankruptcy in the human experience. And that's why it is ours to do. So I close with this. I read something this week that was a debate upon the Hebrew Aramaic language of the words that Jesus uttered when he was actually on this particular symbol. And the very thing that has always been translated, and there are many schools of thought around this, and I offer it to you not as an expert, but out of curiosity. And that is that there is a possible mistranslation. What? Mistranslation? How can that be? It is said in Hebrew that what Jesus the Christ uttered from that particular circumstance was Eli, Eli, lemana sabachthani, which translated means, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? There seems to be an incongruency, if you sat down with everything that we just talked about, for someone who had become self-actualized to have forgotten their connection between their humanity and their divinity. And there are schools of thought that says just by the shifting of one letter from sabachthana to shabachthana, that it translates into this: my God, it is for this purpose that I have come. So today I'm going to go with that. I offer to you, Eli, Eli, Lakmana, Shakbaktana, my God, it is for this purpose I have come. What is that purpose? What is that purpose? It is for you and I to not back away and move back into what's comfortable. But it is to realize that young men are still being shot in their backyards of their grandmother.
It is recognizing that 50 years ago, someone who took this to heart was assassinated. And even 50 years after that, we are still struggling. There is an Alicia Keys song that she wrote after Alton Sterling was murdered. And the chorus of that song, Penelope, remember when we were talking about this? That song? Can you? She wrote this song, and it was called We Gotta Pray. And we do. But it isn't just about prayer. It's also about recognition. And the chorus said something like, we're extraordinary people. You know, extraordinary people is the vertical line that goes from the heavens down into the earth, right? We're extraordinary people living ordinary lives. And we have one extraordinary question. Are we going to run or are we going to fight? So we got to pray. We got to pray about that decision. And I know that the beautiful, incredible Alicia Keys, when she was talking about fight, what she was referring to was about not backing away from that which is unjust. We are extraordinary people living an ordinary life with one extraordinary question. Are we going to run? Or are we going to fight? So we got to pray. How did it go? Something like, we're extraordinary people living an ordinary life. One extraordinary question. Are we gonna run or fight? We gotta pray. So I wanted somebody who could give you that interpretation fantastically. Please welcome Norwood.
We gotta pray. We gotta pray. We gotta pray. Pray for the world tonight. Oh, we gotta save. Somebody save somebody tonight. Fire's in the air. What the hell going on? Sirens everywhere, singing that street song. Violence everywhere, barely holding on. What the hell going on? Do you know who you are? Do you know who we are? We're extraordinary people, living an ordinary life. One extraordinary question. Are we gonna run or fight? So we gotta pray. Pray for the love tonight. End of the day, pray for another try. Smoke is in the sky. What the hell going on? Bullets gonna fly. Hide right from the gun. Trying not to cry. Barely holding on. What the hell going on? Do you know who you are? Do you know who we are? We gotta pray. Oh, we gotta pray. We gotta pray.
So remain standing. Are you extraordinary people? Will you sing that with us? Not as high as you, but I'm gonna. We're extraordinary. We're extraordinary people, living an ordinary life, living an ordinary life, with an extraordinary question. Are we gonna live or die? We're extraordinary people, living an ordinary life, with an extraordinary question. One extraordinary question. Are we gonna live or die? We're extraordinary people, living an ordinary life. One extraordinary question. Are we gonna live or die? We gotta pray. We gotta pray. We gotta pray. We gotta pray. And so this morning we call upon that power of the affirmative word. We are told that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the same that is and was the beginning is what is in existence right here and right now. And so with the power of energy and intentionality and the Word, we call forth now the uprising, the rewiring of that which is justice within ourselves to become integrated fully in the way in which we speak, in the way in which we act, in the way in which we allow that resurrection energy to exemplify itself through our personality, through our circle of influence. Through the direction of our moral compass, which points towards kindness. Towards the conscientious action that we begin to take as we disrupt anything and in all things that are aligned with that which is unjust. We are told that we need to call that out before we can call something else forth. And so it is within this community, it is within this city, it is within this state, it is within this country, it is within this world that we call forth the resurrecting energy of that which is justice. We become the embodiment of that which is the Christ, the fulfillment of that intersection of the divine and the humanity. And we allow this day, this celebration, this moment in time to be the very thing that pushes us out of any stagnation, so that in our golden hours we can smile and we can know that this life has been a life fulfilled. It has been a life where no opportunity has been left dormant. It is a life that we have allowed all limitation to die, so that we rise up and we know for certain that who and what we are Christic beings, revealing the one truth. If you are in agreement with me with that, I ask you to take a deep breath. And I ask you to shout it from the beautiful part of your heart that knows it to be so, that has waited for that recognition and invitation to happen, as together we shout. And so it is. Amen. Thank you.
Hi, I'm David Ault, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com, and there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One, another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.